Okay, welcome back, everyone. So this is another episode of Expansion Podcast, and just sending out a thank you to JP of Wolf Spirit and Ever Beyond Radio for broadcasting this for me. Thank you so much. At some point, I'll really look forward to hopefully being back on Ever Beyond at some point live, because I do enjoy interacting with people in the chat. So anyway, we have a special guest with us today. Sometimes, every once in a while, I'll actually be speaking on my own, but I always like to bring in guests because that's where some really interesting discoveries and conversations can happen, is when I bring in a guest. So for today, I want to introduce you to Sherry Evans. She is local to my area, so it's really nice actually today in the studio I have someone with me in person. In the past, I've usually used some kind of internet format to interview people, but it's nice to have Sherry here live today. So we're going to find out more about her and her work, and also how she perceives things, and how hopefully she can talk to us about her understanding of the evolution of human consciousness, and where we may be heading in the future. So, Sherry, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today. Great. So I just have some questions for you. We can go from there. And I first want to kind of let my listeners know a little bit about you, if you feel comfortable talking about that. Maybe you could let us know. Now you're a psychic, right? Is that what you?
I don't call myself that.
Okay, what do you call yourself?
Spiritual / soul reader.
Soul reader.
But then I
okay.
said one day, well, spiritual might be soul, but spiritual for me is the here and now, and the husbands, and the life, and the children, and soul, we're going back.
Okay.
And usually I start with a soul reading, going back in time, and speaking to the person. Like when I did the reading for you, I talked about Scotland and some other places, and that's where I start, and then I just move through. And what always happens is the person is exactly where they are now is when they were then, with a tweak here and there of consciousness. They keep, in a sense, you repeat your situations if there's a lesson to be learned. So, I usually start, and sometimes I don't even know where I'm going to start, because I can see dimensionally. So doing that, I call in your guides and teachers and mine, and I'll just be sitting there until something breaks through, and then I just go from there, which is nice because I'm channeling it and I don't have to be responsible. With the exception, if I get to a point and I say something and there's some confusion, I will stop, and then I'll adjust that piece of information. Like I might say, well, the woman you're married to now, you were married to in that lifetime, and then I might say, I'll just take a minute to look at that and see if she was your sister or your wife.
Right, to clarify.
Yeah,
sure. I could see how if you are transcending either dimensions or past and present and future, when you transcend that it can sometimes feel very fluid. And does it get, like, how do you maintain sort of your center?
It's the core self. That's where all the knowledge is, and that's where the understanding comes from of where I am. It's like it guides me. The core guides me, and I'm just checking from my higher self and my core self to make sure we're on track. And like you said, if there's some point where I'm not totally comfortable with that, I'll just stop for a minute and readjust and go on. Because the thing about the core self is that it will speak truth. And so I have that to trust.
Sure.
When I'm doing the readings.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, is this an ability that you can kind of turn on and off at will? So it's something like a tool that you can bring in. It doesn't happen to you just willy-nilly?
No, and I'll be going through my day, and because the town I live is small, and the people I run into, I know them or not. They'll see my picture somewhere, and they'll ask me a question, and as fast as they ask me the question, I'm going into my core self, and sometimes higher consciousness, but core self, and I also have the ability to feel them at the same time. So I can feel the emotional body, I can feel the heart, I can feel, up to a point, the mindset. But I'm just moving energetically to see what the problem is, and I can do it pretty fast. And then I'll say sometimes out of the clear blue, because I always ask when there's sign, you need to leave your husband. And they'll start crying. But it's just what I'm getting.
Right.
You know, her sorrow or whatever.
Right, you can pick up on
And
that.
it's never negative, it's never harmful or hurtful to the person. It's just a level of truth. And if I'm not supposed to say it, I can't say it.
So even if you have a certain understanding or you're picking up on information,
Yes.
if it's not helpful for the
Yes.
person,
Yes.
that's something that you
I'll alter it. How is your life situation? Oh, blah, blah, and it's not going too well. And then just by saying that, I'll be back in a church and I'll see the situation where the church was pounding on her brain, you don't get divorced in this lifetime.
Right.
And how she was stuck in that. And I might go there because it's easier to deal with than the moment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you use sort of a person's past life experience
Or present.
Okay, to illustrate a present time problem that they may be
Yes,
encountering.
past or present, yes. And so often it's just a tweak. It's just the ability to look at something at the root level to see where this all started. You know, and so once I offer that information, you can see the wheels turning in the head and the mind, and more than likely they say, "Can I see you again?" You know,
For that support, yeah.
But I want to tell you, a lot of the work I do is street work. It's free work.
Oh, I see. So can you talk more about what that entails? Does that just mean you see a person?
Or they see me.
Okay. And
Or
what?
sometimes I'll be standing next to them
Okay.
and I feel. There's a vibrational field that I feel. But when I'm in their presence, a weird thing happened to me not too long ago. I was in Greenfield Market and this little boy walked up to me. He was about 7 or 8. And he said, "Are you a psychic?" I said, "Well, kinda." And he said, "My mother has PTSD. Can you help her?"
So just out of the blue,
Right,
like he
this
had
little
never
boy.
met
No,
you before.
no.
Wow.
Which is probably his feelings of, I know that lady, or that lady's familiar. And I work with so many healers, and I work in such situations where somebody is going to be able to step in and offer them not healing, but profound healing. I believe that the people I work with are cutting edge, and they're on this earth for that reason. And I'm always looking for more people, and I probably have about 7 or 8, so I'm pleased.
So that sounds like part of the work that you do is collaborative as well. So you may initiate that spark in someone or provide the foundational support and realization and remembrance that a person is looking for.
Yes.
And then also bring in other people to help
Yes.
support that.
And I do, because I am I'm the way shower. That's my title on earth.
Okay.
And I lay the groundwork and I give the possibilities and then turn them over to the person that is most capable of helping you get through this.
That makes sense. Let's go back in time a little bit since we're jumping timelines and going from past to present. Could you talk a little bit about, for you personally, when did you come to realize that you had certain abilities or ways of perceiving existence?
I would say I was about 5 years old, because when they would light the fireplaces in the school that I was in, it was a home, an old home, I would start screaming on the top of my lungs, and I knew I had been burned alive at 5. But who was I going to talk to about it?
So you had like a distinct memory, or was it more of a response?
A response.
So it was more of a response. And then how did that start coming more into the clarity of your consciousness that, oh, I can actually perceive other lives, like, and I'm seeing people around me very much about this one. They only understand what's happening in the here and now. But I actually can see something else. When did that, do you have a recollection of when that started to happen?
I think around 10 or 11,
Okay.
I was accessing my higher self. Because I had 2 sisters, and I was laying there one night. They have to understand that I do believe this, what I said. I do believe it as an adult. I said, I'm from Venus. And they said, you're scaring us. I said, there's nothing to be scared of. I just know I'm from Venus. There's dimensions.
Sure.
And that's where I'm from. And let's see. My life was very hard, very difficult. So the saving grace for me, I won't go into that, but it allowed me to go up the steps and out of that place. What I came to realize in my late 30s is that that lifetime was a culmination of all the past lives that I lived to heal at one time. And I remember saying, this is crazy. I mean, the church is over here and this is over there, and all the people are in my face, you know. So I realized at a young age that I was reliving past lives. But I was surrounded by such loving, supportive, and nurturing men. I didn't have to stay on that level very long. But I knew I was doing it when I was met Eli at 27. We would travel, and this was a businessman, and this was a grounded man, and this is a man that knew what reality was. And he'd point to a man if we were pulled over on the side of the road, and he said, can you help him? A man sitting over there on that bench. I said, I think. And I'd walk over and I'd start talking to him. So he believed who I was. And the funny thing about him is, I had a teacher. She was a pretty amazing lady. She died in the late 80s. I found her from a dream. And he went to see her. He wanted to see who this person was that everybody's talking about.
What was her name, your teacher?
Eleanor Moore.
Okay.
She was from Peterborough. And in the beginning, I don't know how many people came to see her. But in the end, before she died, they were coming from all over the world. And I think probably it was because it was in the early 80s, and you didn't find people like that very easily.
Sure.
But when he walked out, and she said, Eli, you don't have to pay anything because your energy will bring the businessmen in. And you'll put a stamp of approval for them on my work. But Eli, who was so generous and kind, he stuck the money under her sugar bowl. And he went out, and the thing of it is he was watching over me, just, you know. And he went out to the car, and that was fine.
Yes.
So
Nice.
Eleanor was pretty amazing. Where are we? Did I lose a place?
Nope, you didn't lose a place at all. No, we were just talking about, you know, when you just started to discover your abilities.
And so when I was with Eleanor, she said to me, people were coming from all over the world, and they'd be sitting at a table.
And this is your teacher, Eleanor
Yes,
is your
Eleanor
teacher.
Moore, yes.
One of your first teachers.
Yes, the only one, I believe, but
Okay.
whatever.
Sure.
And she turned to me one day. I'd been with her about 7 years, and she said, I want you to read for that man. And I thought, oh no, this is like the Wizard of Oz saying read, you know? And so I did the cards, and she said, you're accurate.
Okay.
And so
when you were reading the cards, were these tarot cards?
Yes,
Or, okay,
yes.
so you read tarot cards
yeah,
sometimes.
I don't anymore because of what happened.
Okay.
I'm trying to think what deck she used, because I have a pretty good memory. It might have been the Weight, because this was a long time ago.
Okay, so did something not so pleasant happen with the tarot cards? And
No,
you stopped?
no. I was working in a bookstore in the middle of the state, I would think. I don't want to give the name of
That's
this.
fine.
And I was thinking about my sister in New York, And all of a sudden, I started writing all this information, and I wrote pages and pages of it.
So like automatic
Yes,
writing?
yes.
Okay.
I assume it was from my higher self. And come to find out, my sister was in the exact same situation of everything I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for about maybe 5 years. It was interesting. I received a letter the other day from a woman in Taos, New Mexico. I studied writing with her, and she said to me, I just came upon the first reading that you did, the channeled writing, and she said, you're so gifted and you're so, real at what you do.
On point.
Yes,
Mhm.
on point.
Okay,
All right,
so
that was the writing.
okay, so
okay.
that's one of the practices that you used to do is channeled writing.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I started working the expos. There were expos.
Like a health expo.
No,
Oh,
they were
psychic.
health, wellness, reading, everything. And there was about 7 in the Massachusetts area. And I couldn't write fast enough. And then I realized that the information was coming through me, and I could just talk about
Talk.
it.
That makes sense.
That's
Yeah.
how it, progressed.
Yes.
And the abilities that I have changed and expanded. But they weren't easy transformations. They weren't easy initiations.
I see.
There would be a
Right.
period of time I'd go through, and it would really be difficult. And go ahead.
So when you would go through these initiations, so it sounded like you first became aware that you could perceive other lives for yourself, and then that kind of expanded outwards to being able to perceive other people, their energy or their past experiences, and then you realized that you had the skill of channeled automatic writing.
Yes, yes.
And so from the juncture of you going from channeled writing to just using your voice, was that a big transition stage? Okay,
no.
so that was pretty mild.
Yes, because I was thinking, how am I going to get all this information? The expos were 25 minutes. And I said, I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to tell them what I'm getting.
Yeah. Okay, so then you went from
easy.
speaking.
It was easy.
Yeah, okay, so that was an easier transition. That seems like more like a creative solution. Like you just took it to the next step. And
Well,
you
being
thought,
so
oh,
intuitive,
yeah, yeah.
And I don't think I was relying on my core self then. But between the last 7 years were so difficult, and especially when the times of the Mayans, 2012, showed itself. Our planet was aligned to our galactic center, and the energy was just changing.
So December
Tremendous.
21st, 2012?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was lucky to have friends around me that knew as well. Nothing in the last 7 years has been easy, so I'll let everybody know that. It's been very difficult. But what happened is, and I will say the child is in me, so I would imagine on the other side it's easy for them to adjust my reality, and but I'm always the one through my intuitive and core self will know if it's true or not. But I got up one night and I was watching this program about a lion. And as I was watching her, I realized that this lion had gone through emotionally what I had gone through in my life. And she lost one of her babies. And she cried and she cried, but she was a warrior. She was a tough warrior. And she decided, probably a lot of people have seen this, that she was going to do a standoff with these water buffalo, that they're not going to get her other baby. And there's so much in that movie that touched my heart. So I went to bed that night and I went to sleep, and her baby was in my bed and she was on the floor. Now, again, this is coming from the creative mind, perhaps, but I knew, and I was talking to Nuri, and I stayed in that altered state for 3 days. And it helped me because I knew she was a warrior and I could let go. We talked about astrology a little bit. And
In the past, yeah, you and
yes,
I.
yeah. It's very important energetically to be in a place where you can be sustained by whatever you come up against energetically.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so what are some practices that you do fairly regularly for yourself just to help take care of yourself, maintain your center, are there any specific practices? I mean, I observed one that you do, is that you actually are very good at keeping yourself hydrated, which I know
Oh,
doesn't
God, yes.
seem
Because,
like a big deal, but
in Chinese medicine, and believe me, this is all coming from the healers. This woman said, I only know 2 people that are double fire, and you are one of them. She said, it's the heart of God. And I cannot not have water. You know, besides what's happening now as our sun is focusing on this earth, you know, for the energy. The only practice I have, and I have to get back to, is walking in the woods.
okay.
Because I used to teach groups and I didn't know what I was going to teach. So I'd walk in the woods, and by the time I came back, I'd know what I have to teach. See, I'm not grounded. I don't have a lot of earth in my chart. And that would give me the understanding of what how I needed to go next.
Yeah, that's a good practice, actually. In Ayurvedic medicine, we hold a really high regard for practices. Here, that's okay. We hold really high regard for practices that that really help us to connect to the natural world, because there's this understanding that we are not separate from nature. So that's actually something that I will recommend a lot to some of my clients and patients, is to try to help them reconnect to that everyday encounter with nature. We just spilled some water, but it's no big deal at all. Yes, don't even worry about it, Sherry.
Well, I know you're
fine.
a perfectionist, so
No,
I thought,
I'm not that perfectionist. I can deal with water.
no, I'm talking about it in a positive way.
Yeah. So I like that that practice of being out in nature. I could see how that would be really important. But even something simple like making sure you're hydrated it seems so simple, but it's really,
Well, I feel like I'm going to pass out after I get a certain point of not drinking water.
yeah,
So,
of course. Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, water itself has a heavy quality to it. This is all according to Ayurvedic medicine.
yes,
So it holds the quality of heaviness, which if you're
that's interesting.
naturally an etheric person, someone that has a lot of ability in the ethers and the air, the lighter qualities, the water can help.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, can help
Because
ground.
people ask me, and I say, I don't know, I just have to drink.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Heavy, good.
So you talked a little bit about being able to kind of see maybe with your mind's eye and also empathize, like you can feel others' emotions. You can see, you can perceive certain scenarios in different lifetimes. Are there any other ways that you feel like you can perceive, like either through hearing, like clairaudience?
I don't have that.
Okay.
Although, wait a minute, I have to re-look at that. I would say it was my guides. Because yesterday they said to me, it's like it comes through my mind, but I know it's not my thought.
Yes, sure.
They told me, they said, shut it down. Like you're really stretching yourself too much. And my lungs were starting to bother me. So that's what I heard, shut it down. Now, I don't consider myself a person that can do that in a spiritual way, but I am so transformed in the higher realms that I can hear those words.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Now, does it come out in terms of, like, can you hear it as your voice, or is it...
No, it's not my voice.
So it's even like another kind of
Yes.
quality
Yeah.
of voice.
And it's when I listen and I pay attention. You know?
Do you feel like most people would be able to also hear these higher guides as well if they pay
I
attention?
think the best way for a person to start is with automatic writing.
If they wanted
because-
to do
yes.
the channel.
Well, I'm thinking if somebody passed over, or if they, you know, because with automatic writing, you don't even take responsibility for it. You just clear your mind. And people would say to me, like, what did you write? I said, I don't know. So I started reading it, and it was accurate, but I didn't remember participating in this. I'm just the writer. But could tell what it was going in, read it over, and knew it was true.
Sure. So how are you able to protect yourself from things that can come through that may not have a positive intention?
I feel it in my core self, or I back away, because I'm all fire and because I'm also a spiritual warrior, I just stop. There's so many safeguards going on around me, but I think it's my higher consciousness. Because when I read, even when I read it, I will know if that's not accurate. But that was a long time ago.
When you were first starting
Yes,
out.
but for people, I think especially if somebody's passed over, they can get messages.
Sure. Yeah.
You just have to meditate, pray, trust, and just sit down and see. And I want to tell you something interesting about that. I would always hear the first line coming in, and I run and grab a pencil and paper. And it'd be something like, "We feel that." I'm there. Wait a minute. Get the paper
Sure.
and pencil, and then I was interested after I wrote it what was said.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
but I go faster than they talk, so I'm so messy.
Oh, that's
I'm
no
so
problem.
messy.
That's
Anyhow.
fine. You can be messy. It's fine. Do you? So it sounded like the work you do is some form of channeling, and I'm sorry to try to pigeonhole this.
No,
I don't
I don't
mean to
mind.
pigeonhole your work at all. It's just so that myself and my listeners can get
Yep.
as clear of an understanding as possible about your work.
I would
So-
say, to make it easier, I'm an empath.
So you're an empath, but it also seems like you channel though. So you're
Oh,
bringing
definitely.
through information.
Definitely.
And is it always from the same beings or same higher self?
yes.
It's always the same.
Because the human mind or the human self opens up. And once it opens up, I'm reading what's going on. You know, I'm just listening and reading. And get a pretty good understanding of what's happening. And nobody's ever turned around and said to me, "You're wrong." You know, they want to hear more.
Sure. Can you see auras and flashes of light and that
Is
kind
there
of thing?
time to talk about Glenn for a few minutes?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. When all our expos closed here and everything else, 7 years ago, I started working as a CNA, which is a healthcare worker. And residence now is definitely the new understanding of truth. And I saw a paper at the post office and it said, "Man with ALS needing caretaker." So I went out there, and all he knew is I was a certified nurse's assistant. He didn't know anything else about my life. But when I walked in, he said, "Is God punishing me?" I said, "No. Give me a few weeks, and I'll let you know."
Because he was diagnosed and had
he was
had
already-
ALS, which is a
yeah.
very debilitating progressive disease.
And
It's fatal.
what the hospice people told me, they believed it was worse than cancer. You know, because not being able to do anything.
Sure.
But he had so much integrity and so much honor that he stayed in the sense of self, and really right till the end conducted his life accordingly. You know, and he because he was from a Harvard graduate, which I found out about 6 months later. He liked to poo-poo what I would say. Energy, past lives, frequency, blah, blah, blah. Don't you have anything else to say? I said, I'm trying to bring the information so you don't have to live this life all over again. And but he had such a brilliant mind that he wanted more, you know. But I will tell you one time, there was a number, but one time I was sitting there and he was a writer. He was a profound writer. And he used to have writing groups come into the house. I guess I write from my heart and soul. So I said, let's share writing tonight. And what I wrote is what I saw. And I saw myself in France with him. I could see the wallpaper, the chandeliers, the tablecloth, the blouse I was wearing. I saw him walk in as an officer, unbuckle something, put it on the chair, and sat down. And I looked at him, and I knew how in love with him I was. And have not had a lot of experiences before that. But I knew if I told him about what I saw, he'd say, "Poo-poo, past lives." So what happened was, I went home, and I kept it with me, and I came in the next night, and I said, let's share writing. He was only using 2 fingers at that point to write with. And he said, you go first. And I read mine, and he said, you know, Sherry, I don't know if it's your voice. I don't know if it's the words. He said, it feels so familiar to me. But I didn't say.
Right, because he wasn't going to
No,
believe it
no,
anyway.
no.
So how has that been for you? So you're what I consider an elder. So you've had a lot of experience that many people can glean from and learn from, which is one of the reasons why I invited you here today. So how are you able to navigate through this life with I would say most people really not wanting to either hear about the more esoteric perceptions of reality? Like, how are you able to navigate through that?
It's very, very hard. And to say that it would be anything other would not be the truth. I was at my sister's 2 or 3 years ago, and I was telling her that I'm able to do channeled writing from Glenn. She called me up about 2 or 3 weeks later, and she said, don't come to this house for Thanksgiving. You weird everybody out. And then through the family. She's a nut. She's crazy.
Right,
She has
so-
stones in her bed.
Yeah, so it impacts family life often, or impacted family life.
And I think people, when I'm out in the world, because I live in a small area, but also I'm in Northampton and Amherst, and a lot of the readings I've done of people here, is that people look at me like she's strange. But I have, most of my friends are healers, like Nuri and I. She's a theta healer.
Okay.
And if I am confused about something, I will definitely call her and run it down to her about something. And about 10, 15 years ago, can I recommend a book?
Sure, of course, yeah.
I went for, I'm not weird, people. I went for a job interview just to deliver information this woman was doing for the people, architect or something. And she said, and I knew her, and I knew her sister because I had done readings for them. She said, I can't hire you for this job because you'll scare everybody. I said, I'm just going to deliver this. She said, no. So she went upstairs, I have a book for you. And when she handed me this book, and I read it, it changed my whole life.
What book? What's the title?
The Lineage of the Codes of Light by Jesse Ayani. And every page I read, I was reading my life. And without a doubt, I knew that I came from the lineage of the priestess. And then, you know, it's really interesting what goes on dimensionally or in the spirit world, because as I was focusing on something and studying on this particular person, Nuri was living in Boston, and she was doing the same research on this person as I was. So I wonder sometimes if that information is just out there to pick up on.
Like when synchronicities
Yes,
occur and
yes.
people come across information at almost the same time. Absolutely. Yeah.
And when I went to the expos, I was so blown away by these books. I was telling everybody. The second book is called The Brotherhood of the Magi, and it's much about Christ and the Knights Templar.
Okay.
And I was fascinated with them. And here they come again. And after I read the second book and gave copies to people everywhere, I said, I've got to find a priestess sisterhood. And the hard thing for me is I can tell by my gut, if nothing else, this is not the real deal, or it's not the real deal for me. It's not what I'm looking for. But I went against my intuition and the knowingness of my soul, and I went to a priestess gathering in North Carolina. I'll leave it at that. And because I'm right brain, I don't process, it is right brain, the creative.
Yes.
I don't process information well from the left brain. And I was there for 3 or 4 weeks flying back and forth, a lot of money. And it was psychological. I was very, very discouraged. And then the teacher didn't like me. The people that were working with the teacher didn't like me. And it might have been because I was just showing my sorrow or my sadness of not being able to having to pay so much money and not getting the understanding. See, I wouldn't
Disappointing.
if I was going to teach a priestess group, I wouldn't teach it based on if whether or not they were aware spiritually. I want to know, what have you suffered in this life and what have you suffered in past lives, so we can get together as priestess and be persons that can help each other heal, because we're still carrying a lot of that. That we still have the knowingness, we still have the understanding, more than a healing group, because you channel, your understanding is vastly the same. I don't know how I got in that.
So a common language kind of thing. Well, I had asked you originally, how it's been navigating through this
And
present time, your abilities.
I guess the way that I have done now, that I'm doing now, is I found a priestess sisterhood in California, and I do all my work with them online, and the gatekeeper is the real deal, and the work we do is just phenomenal. It's real. It's the real deal.
So the work you do with these other women, is it all women or not?
Yes, no,
necessarily?
this one is all women.
So the work you do with all these women, is it more to do with like larger groups of people? Is it more to do with earth energies? What is the group work? If you mind me asking, I don't know if it's private or not.
No, this woman just knew that she was a physical therapist. No, she was a therapist, and she knew that there was more out there, and we weren't getting it, we weren't understanding it. And for some reason, she met a woman who was a high priestess, and this woman showed her and took her through many initiations and understandings about what the priestess were. And she started off 4 years ago, and maybe there was 20 people, and then there was 30 people. In her pod, I guess, there's over 450 people, but she's connected to groups all over the world, and there's over 44,000 women in these groups. And I'm not surprised, because the feminine, the divine feminine, is rising.
It sure is.
And a lot of it has to do with healing men.
Well, yeah, I mean, if men are imbalanced or if women are imbalanced, you have to help each other. Yeah, you can't have one imbalance and not the other. So do these collectives of women work to help shift human consciousness? So that's part of the work. Do they work with earth energies at all or not? Okay. And
Yes.
okay, yeah. So that brings me to my next question. How do you think human consciousness is evolving, if at all?
Well, to me it's interesting, because an earlier question you asked me, how do I negotiate through life? And for some reason, I don't know why this is, I'm always in the present moment when I'm in a place. And I see people in present time. And I can see how unhappy so many of them are, how confused and how lost they are. At the same time, there's so much happening astrologically. And I'm not an astrologer, I just understand the energy. But what's happening in our solar system and what's happening with the galactic center, it's almost like, and God, some astrologer out there will say she doesn't know what she's talking about, she's a nut. To me, it's almost like the planets are doing battle to diminish darkness and negativity.
Okay.
And I know that to be true. But a year and a half ago, I stopped sleeping till 3 a.m. So I have friends everywhere, not the priestess group, but people I found who could answer questions for me. And I knew what the answer was going to be, and I wasn't liking it. When I stopped sleeping, I've been vibrating at a frequency for about 10 or 15 years that is not necessarily comfortable.
Sure. I mean, I can sense it.
Yeah.
Sitting next to you.
Well, I tell people, I don't usually know what they think. It's almost like, but I just live with it. And then all of a sudden I started realizing that the vibrations coming into my body at that time of night were even more intense than normal.
So up until about 3 a.m. and then you're able to
Yes,
sleep
then
for a
I
little
start,
bit?
and then I start coming down with teas, with flower essences. Bach has great flower essences now for sleeping and resting. But I don't like it because 2 days ago I fell asleep at 5 o'clock and I woke up at 2 in the afternoon.
Sure.
And I don't know how many hours that is. I don't know how many hours it is. But you wake up at 2 and it's dark at 4.
Yes.
So I
Right.
don't get much time to do a lot.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And unlike you, housework suffers.
Well, of course. Yeah.
No, you're a perfectionist.
Not as much as you think.
It looks.
Yeah.
It just looks that way.
I fake it till I make it
Yeah.
a lot of times. Yeah.
It's true.
I actually also really enjoy improv, kind of the joy of things happening spontaneously. There's a side of me that definitely gets agitated with that, but having a little one, having a daughter, it's helped to open up that side of really being able to kind of go with the flow a little bit more. And seeing the joy of that,
Yes.
like that's also really enjoyable.
Well, I have something to say about that.
Sure.
When this all started 7 years ago, Glenn was writing through me. He stayed with me energetically. Is that right to say this?
Oh, it is. I'm just checking. Yeah.
He stayed with me energetically for a year after he died. He said,
This was your client. Were you actually in a relationship with this person or no?
This was Glenn, the man that was dying of
Of ALS, yeah.
We had a spiritual and soul connection, especially after I saw him. But, he was ill, and
Yeah.
it would take too long to explain to you what happened to me that affected his entire body to open and him to leave. And so he told me the night he was ready to leave. And he did. He left that night. He was gone. And then his energy came back in about 3 weeks later and was with me for a year. And he had much to do, but a friend of mine was meditating and she called and said, Glenn came through, said he wants to write for you and to thank you for all the information you gave him about his circumstance and that he can heal on the other side.
Yeah.
And then for 3 years I would write him and he would write me. And then I got tired of it. I just threw the pen. I said, I can't live on energy and writing. I need to be with flesh and bones. And I just really walked away from it, and I had a battle with the divine, You're leaving me here alone. It's too hard to be alone with all the conflict with people when I'm only trying to help them.
Yeah, it can be difficult.
So I, as a warrior, my guides, my teachers are telling me, you have to surrender. I said, first I have to be a warrior to save my entire life, and now you tell me to surrender.
Yeah.
And I threw a fit. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to do it. And so I wrote a piece called The Warrior's Surrender, and I said at the bottom, I'm a phoenix and I will rise again. That had to be my piece. When I'm ready, I'm going to rise. But I couldn't live controlling any part of the situation in any way, shape, or form. Because if I went out to find a job, I could go to 30 places and I wouldn't get a job. But somebody would walk up to me on the street and say, I have a job. Because I had to surrender to the process. They're running the show. I'm not. So that's what you're talking about with the spontaneity.
Yeah, absolutely. Allowing for more of that to come in.
So I'm, like you, pursuing me.
Right.
Wanting a reading.
Yeah, I was very
And here I am
persistent.
today.
Yeah.
I couldn't have pulled that off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's why collaboration is so important, because everyone has their own unique path and their own unique gifts to bring. And I don't think we're meant to be able to do it all, because then what's the point of being a human in this experience? Is if you can do it all yourself, it's very limiting. It's much more joyous to be able to share, I think.
It is.
So before I forget, I just want to, we do have time left, but I do want to kind of find out from you a little bit more how you would be able to maybe work with some of our listeners, some contact information that you can share with them. For example, do you offer readings for people? How long does that usually last? How can people get in touch?
Okay, if they're coming to my home or business office, the readings are an hour to an hour and a half. And I don't imagine they would be any less. because if they can show me a picture of a person, whether it's their daughter, their mother, I'm not a medium, but if their mother's passed over, I can tell them where she is and how she is, and sometimes get a message. If they're in the New England area and it's not more than an hour or two, I might even travel to where they are, because I'd rather do readings in person. But if they can't, I have Skype.
Okay,
So
so
we
people
can do
can
it.
contact you via Skype. Do you have a website that people can go to?
I can. It's Facebook, but it looks strange, I'm sure, because the person that did it for me, I'm not sure she knew what she was doing.
Well, that's okay. So
But-
your Facebook page, is it just Sherry Evans?
Sherry Evans, spiritualreadings.com.
Okay, so it's Sherry Evans, Cheri. Evans is EVANS, spiritual readings with a S.com. So
Why not?
yeah. So if you Google that, you can get onto her Facebook page. I would say I contacted her myself by Facebook Messenger, so I think that would be a good way to get in touch with her. If you want to receive a reading, you can contact her and figure out the pricing and everything like that.
Oh, you don't want me to tell them the pricing now?
You can. You're welcome to.
It's $75 to $100. This is,
Okay.
yeah. And if I travel, it's more than that.
Yeah, you need
Yeah.
to cover travel
Yeah.
expenses and
Yeah.
time for that. Sure. So Skype reading would be 75 to 100. Is that sliding scale or
Yes.
is that okay?
Yes.
Sliding scale, and that would be the same for an in-person visit if you're local to Western Massachusetts. So great. And then, so do you have any projects or anything coming up that you're thinking about working on that you want to share with the listeners?
Yes. I read a book when I was down at the Priestess Gathering in North Carolina, and the book was called An Invitation. I believe that was the title. It was written by Oriah Mountain Bear. And when I read that book, it slammed what is your truth, what is your reality. Slammed it. How do you feel? How do you feel about this? What do you feel about that? And it was so informative. And where I lived at the time, at my house, it was large. My roommate said, you know, you're the real deal. She said, you need to start teaching this. So I said, I'm going to teach the authentic self. And I've been walking around it for the last year. Because what I find with the authentic self is you have to be really, just give me a minute, I'm trying to find the word, committed to wanting to be the real deal. And the reason for me with this is this. Most of us that have this kind of awareness are in the fourth dimension. We are heading for the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is known as being in the dimension of co-creation. And you can't co-create anything if you don't know who you are. You just can't. Because what you're thinking and what you're wanting might not at all be true of what you're feeling and the core self. So it's very important to me to teach this class. It just hasn't, I'm trying to bring it together. And I taught groups. I think there was Spirituality 101. But I don't want to stay on that level anymore. And the second thing is people have to do their work.
Do you think people are doing their work?
No,
Their own
because
growth, self-growth?
no, because I taught 3 groups at the same time. And this is what I would be saying to people every time they walked in the door. What are you feeling? Well, I don't know what I'm feeling. Well, figure out what you're feeling. Because they don't want to feel. They don't want to feel their loneliness or their despair or their relationships. Or they don't want to feel any of that. But unless you're feeling who you are, you're not going to know who you are.
Yeah, you
said,
have to
"Get out
get
of your
through
head.
it.
Get
Yeah.
out of your head."
Yeah.
So at this point, I don't see that many people like myself who are tearing at the truth, wanting to know. You know,
Do you think part of that,
Yes.
like what's creating part of the problem of that? I mean, one thing I see is a distraction with all
Life.
of our, distraction with life, sure, and dramas. But that's part of why we're here also, is to experience the whole variety of emotions and interrelationships. But I see a lot of distraction with, like the digital age. I grew up, I'm in my early 40s, so I was able to witness the turning over from analog world to digital. And the level of distraction, myself included, with devices, with things moving at a very rapid pace in terms of input, in terms of like things you see on screens, for example. Everything's very fast and distracting. So if you're feeling crappy about something, you can just go onto your phone and get distracted. So I think
But
I see that happening.
looking at you and knowing you, even a short amount of time, I can feel that if something's on your plate and you're not comfortable with it, that you're going to find the reason for that.
Yeah,
And what.
sure.
It's like when I did the reading for you. Let's look at this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have such a strong mind and such a strong sense of self. Unless there were issues that you needed clarity on, you wouldn't even have to go to that, because you're in touch with self. You're in touch with a knowingness.
Do you have suggestions for how people can try to get more in touch with themselves?
Yeah, go out in the woods and ask the earth, because from what I'm understanding recently, especially with this priestess group, that we're so connected that the earth is willing to assist us in whatever problem. And I just know that that's where I get a lot of information. But the thing of it is, and you're right, people's world now, what do you call it?
It's just very digital. Yeah.
I'm old.
No, it's
No, I didn't grow up with that.
Sure.
Well, nobody know anyway. That is a distraction. But
The same way television was a distraction. Very distracting. If you feel crappy, you just put on your favorite television show and you feel a little bit better.
well, unfortunately, it doesn't make any sense. But I'm very political, and
That kind of passion and fire, that makes
Yes.
sense that you would be.
yes, I'm very interested in what's happening in
Politically.
Saudi Arabia and Africa, and what Dummy's saying, and I'm hoping I'm not going to see him much longer. But that and the art world, but I don't have a lot of time with the art world. But I think going in the woods, if they can pull themselves away, if they can have some kind of ritual going on, and this is a good place to start. What are the answers you want to know? Am I in the right job? Am I in the right relationship? How do I expand spiritually? You can put these down and you can pick even one and start challenging it.
Right. Yeah, it seems like that quiet time, that alone time is necessary for human consciousness to evolve. So, you talked about groups of people kind of being more in the fourth dimension, kind of working their way to connecting more to the fifth dimension. So that's like multitudes of people. And so do you see an increase in that, in the number of people that are able to reach that level?
I do. I used to say maybe 5%. But after the woman from the Priestess Presence told me that she had 44,000 women globally, I know that we're probably up to about 10%. But I call them the God people. You don't have to be religious.
Right.
You just have to have a heart, and that you're down if you have a heart. I believe these people are all over the world. I believe they intervene and don't even call themselves spiritually. A nurse did something for me once that changed my life at that moment. I didn't need to tell her about past lives or anything. Her heart was there.
Right.
So, what I do know is an absolute is that darkness is losing because love has won. And we're out there, but darkness will fall. And so it might be the really gifted people in the world. It might be 10%, all the healers and such. But the people with the heart are making a difference. So I say there's I believe it even in our government, and I'm behind anybody that I know is heart-based.
Sure. that makes sense.
And so we're in the middle of transition because the way our lives operate, the way our government operates, the way the world operates is so destructive. It's, what's the word when you say it's going into everybody, or it's
Pervasive.
Yes, it's going within people. But I know so many people in this area, and actually throughout the United States, and they're making a difference.
Yeah.
And we want to.
Sure. I think people are getting so uncomfortable with the status quo. They're starting to wake up a little bit because it is getting so uncomfortable, and the darkness is really starting to be uncovered here.
Well, when I saw that program on 60 Minutes last Sunday, and I looked at the conditions in Saudi Arabia, and the reasons the children are dying, after the program, I said, I got to do something about, some way, somehow, I have to do something for that. And I didn't know what to do. So I went and I prayed for them. And I was in CVS, and this lady and I were looking at some product, and she said, I'm so tired of our president. I'm so tired of the negativity. I said, you see 60 Minutes? She said, yes. Made me cry. I said, you're one of us. I just hugged her.
Yeah, because she can feel.
Yeah, feel. That's it.
Yeah, no, it's important.
And that is the work of the authentic self.
To feel.
To feel.
Yeah, in Ayurveda, in Sankhya philosophy, which is the philosophy that Ayurvedic medicine follows, there's an understanding that the seat of consciousness is within the heart area.
Yes.
It's not the head.
No.
It's not necessarily even the pineal gland, although that plays a part, but it resides in the heart. So that's very important.
But doesn't it all cross over?
It does, of course.
It's real.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, different traditions usually speak the same language of different words,
Yes.
but yeah, it is always the same. So we are going to be wrapping up. Is there anything else that you had wanted to share with the listeners, either about your work, about how you're seeing kind of the present moment, kind of where maybe we're headed as a collective, something like that?
I think that's where it comes with the surrender. I even hate that word because I'm such a doer and goer. But I found that if I surrender and just keep walking my walk and dreaming my dream of what could be, you know what it is? When I go through life and I see so many people are not home, it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart for myself because I live in this lonely, how do I want to say it? I'm not always assured when I go out in the world that I'm going to meet anybody that's going to be heart-based or in there. You can tell by their eyes if they're awake, if they're part of this journey, if they're part of this transition to move past the third dimension. And the third dimension, no force of darkness can get above it. That's where it's held. And once you're in the fourth dimension, that's when you're really doing your work. You're cleaning up, dusting off, looking, and then fifth dimension is co-creation, and we're heading towards that. You know?
Yeah.
I know all this stuff is going to fall without naming it.
Yeah, you don't need. It's true. You don't need to name it. So Sherry, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For joining me today. I really appreciate your
Thank you.
time
Thank you.
and your insight.
Yes.
So again, for the listeners, this is Sherry Evans with me today, and her website, you can just Google Sherry Evans Spirit Healing.
Spiritual readings.
spiritualreadings.com. And also, my name is Shalyn Tatro, and I never introduce myself. I always forget to do that. And you can also go onto YouTube and look up CHELYNNT. That is my YouTube channel. I put all my podcasts that I have done previously are listed on there. And my website is www.chelynnt.com. You can find out more information about the work that I do and the consultations that I offer. So thanks again to JP for broadcasting this for me. I appreciate it. And I'll be back next month on Ever Beyond and Wolf Spirit Radio. Thank you, everyone.